Good Friday tomorrow, we brought it forward to today. We're going to be doing these hopefully every 2 weeks on a relevant topic that we think would help you all on your journeys, both the current cohort and the fellows. And we're really delighted to have Tarryn doing our first session. Tarryn has worked with Ellie a lot in the past at the Raymond Ackerman Academy. Really, so she understands the challenges of an early stage entrepreneur. She's doing a PhD in finance for entrepreneurs, so she's very well qualified to do the session. Tarryn will explain a little bit of the sort of the house rules in terms of questions, etc. But I think, and she'll reiterate this, but I want you to hear it from me too. I think sometimes it can be a bit intimidating, and we might feel a little, you know, there might be questions that we think we should know the answers to, so we don't ask them. And so I think, please don't hold anything back. You're in a safe space here. There's no such thing as a stupid question. If you're not sure on any terminology or what a word means or whatever, feel free to ask. And what we're suggesting is if you can open your chat room just to put those questions in the chat, so we make sure we don't lose track of them. But please use this as an opportunity. You won't get many opportunities to have somebody of Tarryn's experience in front of you like this and available to answer questions you have. Okay, so with that, Tarryn, I'll hand over to you. Oh, sorry, one other thing we might have joining us, hopefully they're still connecting. We've got some new members of the Further Fellowship who the Cape Town cohort met at our event. Ironically, though, they're in Joburg, even though we met them in Cape Town. The guys from the Soweto Arts and Crafts Market, who are doing some amazing work in supporting creative arts and finding markets for them. So we've got Black Rose, Mabalig, Seppo and Simpiwe joining us at some stage. Okay, and with that, I'll hand over to you, Tarryn.
Hey, Ian, thanks so much. I'm going to leave my video on for a little bit. And perhaps as we go through the slides, if you guys are struggling to cope with slides and picture, I'll switch it off. But it's just also nice to see who it is that's talking to you for the moment. So as Ian says, finance and accounting and numbers and spreadsheets have a very real tendency to make people freak out a little bit. When we start talking about numbers, when we start talking about profit margins, when we start talking about real sort of accounting jargon type things, a lot of people's eyes glaze over and they just switch off and they're like, that's not me, I got to be out of here. So it's very real, and maths anxiety is very real. It happens, and when we start thinking about maths and we start thinking about numbers, a lot of us panic. And when you panic, bizarrely, your brain stops working. So the more you panic, the less likely you are to be able to figure it out. So the idea here today is to just very gently, let's talk about a few basic finance concepts. And absolutely, as Ian says, there are no stupid questions. None, not a single one. Every question is an absolutely valid question. And we will take as much time as we need to work through everything. So just a little bit of background on me. I have been in the startup space for a very long time in various forms. I've tried to start my own business a couple of times over, and businesses don't succeed for sort of three principal reasons. Number one, they had a rubbish product, okay? You know, you were trying to sell the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong people, or your product wasn't good, so you didn't have a business. Number two is that they can't get out there and distribute their product. They don't have that sales network, they don't speak to people, they don't tell anybody about it. So you can have the best product in the world, but if no one knows about your product, no one knows about your business, your service, your business is dead. And number 3 reason why businesses fail is because they don't take care of the operational bits and pieces. So the operational bits and pieces are keeping track of the money, keeping track of staff contracts, talking to the bank, talking to the grant office, doing all those sometimes dull but very worthy parts of the business. So I've tried to start several things. For me, they didn't fail because I wasn't keeping track of the money. I was, maybe even too meticulously, but they failed because I'm just not a salesperson. I'm rubbish at selling. I honestly hate the whole sales process. So for those of you that are great at selling, you have my full admiration. It's just not something for me. So we're all good at different things. And what's important to recognize is that when we're running a business, we actually need to be pretty good at all of those things. We need to be able to sell. We need to have a good product that our customers and our community needs. And we really need to pay attention to the business admin, which includes business finances. Because if we don't have those 3 parts working, chances are our business is not going to succeed. So today is about, let's try and upskill ourselves a little bit on that 3rd leg, the business operations, and whatever we need to do to improve our knowledge, improve our skills in that, let's tackle it now. Okay, let me make sure I can change my slides. There we go. All right. So this slide, and I hope it's all changed for you guys. Just a little note, if you are joining, won't you mute your mics? Otherwise we get sort of background. Well, in my case, you'll hear my kids screaming at each other or my dog barking, but we've all got different background noise that'll cut in. So if you mute your mic, and again, as Ian said, if you've got questions as we go, I'm totally happy to sort of break away from the slides and chat to questions. So make sure that you can get hold of that Zoom group chat and just post a message in there. You know, anything that's on your mind, business, finance, operations related, now's the time. So as Ian mentioned, I'm busy doing a doctoral degree, which I know sounds fancy, and I hope that doesn't make you feel intimidated, like you can't ask me stuff, because what I'm studying is what is it that entrepreneurs exactly like you at very early stages need to know in order to give themselves the best chance of business success. So it's this concept of, are you financially literate? And most times when we talk about financial literacy, we're really talking about, are you good with money? Like, can you manage your money? And certainly in a personal sense, are you saving? Do you overspend? You know, what's going on with your money management? But there are actually 3 parts to being financially literate. And most of us think it's just about what we know. Like, oh, I've never studied accounting. I've never studied finance. I don't know anything. I'm not financially literate. But there are 2 other components that are actually just as important, perhaps even more important. So it's not just about what you know, like your actual knowledge about finance and accounting and managing your business finances, but it's what you do. What steps, what actions do you take to give yourselves the best chance of financial success? And then, very importantly, it's about your attitude. And this is where I think a lot of people let themselves down, because they're like, oh, I don't like numbers. I don't know how to use a spreadsheet. I don't like maths. I hated maths. My teacher told me I was no good at maths. Honestly, I think maths teachers should be shot if they say that. But what it means is that a lot of people don't have confidence when it comes to dealing with numbers. And that's what attitude's about. If I'm not confident, I won't find somebody who can help me because I will be too scared to ask the questions. If I'm not confident, I will just ignore the finance stuff because it doesn't make me feel good. And if I don't have a little bit of self-discipline, which is part of our attitude as well, I'm going to just keep putting off the finance stuff, and I'm going to let it build and build and build until it swamps me. So it's about saying, I've got to get this right. I have to. It's part of your business. You cannot escape it. You need to get this right. So let me take the steps and be confident about taking the steps. So this is not confident that I know everything. This is confident that I'm going to take the steps to increase my knowledge and make my behavior better. And these three things feed into each other. So let me give you an example of how behavior actually shapes knowledge. Let's say you have a credit card, and a lot of us do, and you've overspent on your credit card and you don't pay the minimum that the bank needs from you each month. And that's happened. Loads of people know what that feels like. What happens? The bank penalizes you for not paying. They charge you a fee for not paying. What does the feeling of getting that fee, which is because of your poor behavior of not settling your credit card, gives you knowledge? Hey, if I'm using credit, I better pay. So knowledge and behavior feed into each other. And your attitude would be to pick up the phone to the bank and say, what's going on? Why have you charged me this fee? How can I fix this? So these three things all work together to make us financially literate. So we're going to talk about financial knowledge, because that's the sort of the big thing, and we can all work on our behavior and we can work on our attitude, but let's talk a little bit about some financial knowledge issues. So really, this breaks down into 7 categories that we really should have some information on. We should have some information on records management. We should have some information and knowledge on financial data preparation, on financial data analysis, on budgeting and planning, on revenue generation, dealing with financial service providers, and dealing with regulators and regulations. So I'm not sure how many people can tick boxes on that. So that slide probably made you panic. And I put it up there on purpose, because this is what tends to happen, is that somebody like me uses these fancy words like records management, like financial data preparation, like financial data analysis, like dealing with financial service providers. And for a lot of entrepreneurs who don't come from any kind of prior learning background on finance and accounting, you hear those words and you're like, oh, I don't know anything, I'm checking out. So I did that on purpose. All right, so I almost hope I made you panic a little bit, like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything. So the important thing here is don't let the jargon of finance and accounting derail you, make you freak out, make you panic, make you check out and not take the steps to increase your knowledge. So let's talk about these categories and you'll realize you actually know exactly what I mean. When we're talking about records management, this is about our business paperwork. Every business has paperwork, even if you're trading as a sole trader, so you don't have a formally registered business, you have a relationship with your bank. That generates paperwork through your bank statements. You are selling stuff, that generates invoices. You're buying things from your suppliers, that also generates invoices. So these are bits of paper that actually form the evidence of our business. So anybody who's watched any kind of like CSI type program, you know that you need evidence to figure things out. And in a business sense, your paperwork is actually your evidence of your business transactions. Every time there's a transaction, there's essentially a paper trail. Now, the paper doesn't have to be physical. It can be an electronic paper trail, but there is a paper trail. So when we talk about records management, this is about getting your business paperwork organized. When we talk about financial data preparation, this is really keeping track of the money. So I'm using big words, but what it distills down to is keep track of your money. When I talk about financial data analysis, this is really what's working and what's not. Analyzing is looking at it and thinking about it critically. Is something working? Yes or no? Is it not working? Yes or no? What should I do to fix it? What should I do to do more of what is working? What should I do to change what's not working? That's the analysis process, but it's using your numbers from your business that flow from your business records that you prepare and gather together to figure out what's going right and what's going wrong so that you can make good decisions on how to change things. Now, the important thing, and this is really quite critical at the moment, budgeting and planning. So what is this about? This is about putting together a plan and sticking with it. And a lot of us put a plan together and then we forget that we put the plan together and we never look at it again. So part of a budgeting and planning process is revisiting your plan, revisiting what you thought about. Revenue generation. This is pretty simple. If you're not selling anything, you really have no business. And if you've got no business, you're not going to make any impact in your community, which is, I know, what's really important to all of you. So no sales, no business, no impact. And that's when we're talking about revenue generation. Dealing with financial service providers. Sometimes this gets shortened to FSP. And if you've ever listened to an ad or seen a print ad of anything from a bank or an insurer, they have FSP number, and they've got a little number there. So a financial service provider is anybody, insurance, banking, microloans, that are regulated. In other words, somebody's checking that they're not trying to fleece you. Sometimes it's payday lending, but somebody like a loan shark on the corner lending you money, no FSP number. They are unregulated. Nobody's checking that they're doing right by their customers. We have to interact with financial service providers in some way. It might just be our bank, but the important thing here is to talk to them. That's the critical part of the financial service provider piece. And then we've got dealing with regulations. Right now, every day, our government gazettes new regulations of what we can and can't do. So we're in a very tricky regulatory environment. You know, we're not allowed to leave our homes right now, which is unbelievable type of regulation to deal with the current crisis that we're faced with. But even outside of this period, we have to operate within regulations. So those might be tax regulations, it might be regulations around consumer protection, dealing with your customers, treating them fairly. But the people that you interact with, the businesses you interact with, also have to comply with regulations. So when we talk about financial knowledge and we talk about these 7 big categories and we give them fancy words, this is really quite simple stuff. Get organized, keep track of the money, figure out what works and what doesn't, stick to your plan, make sure that you're actually generating sales, talk to the people like the bank, like the grant provider, and comply with the regulations, and to some degree, make them work for you. So let's dig into some of these topics a little bit more. And again, as we go, please feel free to use that group chat function and send me a message and we can discuss it, because we're all here to learn from each other. So when we're talking about getting our paperwork organized, which is records management, that's the fancy accounting term for it, this is about, are you filing and storing properly your business documents? And I'm not sure how many people can really stick their hand up and say, I am super organized. I know where everything is. You asked me for an invoice from 6 months ago, I can find it for you. In reality, this kind of admin bugs a lot of us. And we think, I should be spending my time on my product or my sales. And don't get me wrong, those are two very important pieces, working on your product, working on your sales. But this is where that self-discipline, where that behavior of setting aside some time to get yourself organized is really important. You cannot gather together your financial information and you cannot analyze your financial information if you don't do this part. This is a really foundational step. So you don't have to have hard copies of your business documents. You don't. I really would suggest to you that you figure out what works for you, some kind of mechanism of storing your business documents. And the easy thing to do right now is just take a photo with your phone. All of us have got smartphones. You know, our smartphone saturation in South Africa is off the charts. We've all got them. Take a photo with your phone. Figure out how you're going to store those photos. So look at something like a Google Drive or a Dropbox, free cloud-based services that will allow you to keep an absolutely rock solid record of your business paperwork. So we don't have to have boxes and flip files and folders. We don't. We can keep this all electronically. But don't just dump all these photos into a Dropbox and forget about them. Don't just dump them onto Google Drive and say, oh, I'm done. I've got a record of everything. You actually have to create some organization. You can, and there's no right or wrong here. There's got to be something that works for you. You can create folders for each month. So I can have all my January 2020 papers in one folder, or my February 2020 papers in another folder, and so on. Or depending on how you are interacting with your community and your suppliers, maybe you group all your suppliers together. Maybe you've got 5 major suppliers of your things, or 5 major customers buying your product. Group their paperwork together. The other thing to do is to make sure that when you sell something, you actually create an invoice. And some of our businesses are very much cash-based, and that's fine. But you need to create, even for yourselves, some kind of record of that sale. And the record of a sale is an invoice. It says, this is the customer, this is what they bought, this was the price. And we can just do that by hand and take a photo, no problem. We can do it in a spreadsheet. We can keep a track in a document somehow. But there are a lot of free invoicing software platforms out there that allow us to set up our customers and to create an invoice. And this is what we sold them on this date. So use this time now to figure out how you are going to invoice your customers, because that is your absolute evidence that you've made a sale, is the invoice. The bank statement that shows your customer paying for your goods or shows you depositing the cash, putting the cash into the bank from that sale, that's the absolute evidence of the payment. So there's 2 parts. There's got to be evidence of the sale, which is an invoice document, and evidence of the payment, which comes through on the bank account. The reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people say, well, I've got my bank statement. I can see the money coming in and out. Isn't that good enough? And it's actually not. We've actually got to have another piece. When we buy from a supplier, they need to send us an invoice. Otherwise, how do you know what you got? How can you check that what they've sold you is what they're charging you for? So they need to send you an invoice when you buy from them, which again will have you, your business name, what you bought, what it cost, and a total. So that would be an example of an expense invoice, you purchasing. Or if you've sold something, you create the piece of paper that says, hey, I've sold this. Here's the piece of paper proving that I sold it. Now, what happens if you buy something from a shop? You don't get an invoice. If I go into, let's say I need some coffee for my office, because I've got a few people that work for me, and I go to the Pick and Pay, and I buy coffee, and I buy milk, and I buy sugar, and I buy some cups, and I buy some spoons. I don't have an invoice from Pick and Pay. I've got a receipt. But I do have a receipt, and that's also good. And so I can take a photo of my receipt because now I've spent money in doing something for my business. Not buying coffee and sugar for my personal consumption, just for me. I'm buying coffee and sugar and milk for my business. So if you go and buy things for your business and you get a receipt from the shops, take a photo. That is a form of proving that you spent money on your business. What we've got to do, absolutely, and even if you've got, folders by month to store your documents, what you've got to do is not throw together documents that show your sales with documents that show your expenses. We've got to pull those things apart. So we've got to have a little folder or group or appropriate file names of our photos of us making sales, and an appropriate folder or group or file names of us incurring, paying for expenses that relate to our business. Those are two separate parts. And if we throw all the things together in one folder, it's going to be really, really hard to extract, to pull the detail off from that, to be able to get organized and to be able to do some analysis. So this part is really, really, really important. And this part's also the most boring. It absolutely is. It is boring to organize paperwork. It is boring to do filing. It is boring to set up file structure. It is, absolutely. So this is where your attitude in that whole financial literacy piece becomes so important. You've got to say, this is important. I know I don't like it. I know I'd rather be thinking about my product. I'd rather be selling. I'd rather be doing all sorts of other things. But if I don't get this right, this is the foundation of my business finances, the rest is going to fall apart. So a lot of us now are unable to operate our businesses in this environment. This is the perfect time to do that kind of admin. Spring clean your business admin now. And in the future, set aside some time every week to do this. And if you keep on top of it, you probably need 20 minutes a week to just get everything organized. If you don't keep on top of it, can you imagine now trying to sift through several months worth of information and sort it out? It becomes an absolute mountain. So your attitude has to be right on this, to say, I don't like it, but I have to do it. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to set aside some time to get this right. I'm going to change my behavior and how I think about this, because without this, I can't get any knowledge from my business. So getting organized, really, really important. Right, so when we talk about now financial data preparation, this is about keeping track of the money. And we can't keep track of the money if we're keeping no record, not managing our records. We have no idea what's coming and going. And we might look at our bank statement, but like, what did we spend on expenses? How many sales have we made? We don't know. We don't know. A lot of people will be mixing together their business and personal expenses. That's really common, very much so in an early stage. You don't have a formally registered business. You haven't gone and set up a business bank account. You're using your bank account. So how do you know when you go to Pick n Pay and you buy things, how do you know whether those Pick n Pay expenses were for you, for your family, or they were for your business? Really becomes tricky to pull apart business expenses and personal expenses. The problem is, if you don't pull those things apart, you don't actually know how your business is doing. You sort of have a vague idea of how you're doing, but you can't say my business is doing well or my business is spending too much on a certain expense. It's really hard. And we could take the time to look at our bank statement and make a little mark, personal business, personal business, personal business. But that's creating quite a lot of admin headache for us. And that takes a lot of time to go through each line item in a business account and figure out what was business and what was personal. So quite an easy suggestion, and you can do it probably now because I think the banks are very much geared to online, is to think about if you don't have a formally registered business, and that's fine, you're operating as a sole trader, it's just you doing your thing, think about opening another bank account, and it'll be in your name as an individual, but using that other bank account for your business expenses. So you have two personal bank accounts. One is essentially your business bank account, and one is your personal bank account. I'm just going to pause at one point because I see I've got a question. Hang on a sec. Okay. So we're getting to how to address this blurring between founder money, which is yours, and business money. So here's something really important. If you guys as individuals have put the money in to start your business, from an accounting point of view and from a tax point of view, we've got to figure out whether you've put it in as what is known as equity, like you've given the business the money and in return you own the business, so you're a business owner, or you've actually lent the business money. So it could be a loan to the business. Now, when I make a loan to someone wants to borrow money from me, I'm not that generous. I'm not going to say, here's a loan, you don't have to pay me back. I want to be repaid. I'm happy to lend money, but I want to be repaid. So that's why it's also if you have set business, either done it through making a capital investment in that business. Hey, business, here's the money. I am now the 100% owner. So that's equity, that's capital investment. Or, hey, business, here is a loan so that you can get going, in which case, just when the bank lends you money, there's a stack of paperwork. If you lend your business money, you actually need some paperwork to say, I have lent the business 10,000 Rand on this day. The business is going to pay me back in this way. The business maybe doesn't have to pay you interest. A document about families. Families can work really well. that transaction. My parents have lent me 5,000 Rand for my business. I will repay them by 2022. Could be far in the future, it's not a problem. But to have some kind of documentation, a record, an evidence of that transaction. So going back to this blurring of business and personal expenses, you do want to think about potentially opening another bank account for your business. And this is on the assumption that you're not a formally registered business where you can go and open a business bank account, in which case you would have to go to the bank with a whole stack of documents about your business. In its own right. So let's say we're not there yet. We're just running a business and it's us, sole trader. Think about opening up another account in your name. That's your business account. Could be with a different bank, right? So let's say I have got a FNB account, and that's my personal account, and I go and open up another personal account at Capitec, and I'm going to use my for me personally, and it's just personal account. This is not a salary, but you can think about it like a salary. Say, I need to have 7,000 Rand every month because I've got to pay rent, I've got to buy groceries, I've got to pay school fees, I've got to put, pay for transport. My business is making sales. My business does 20,000 Rand a month in sales. My business from my Capitec account is going to pay me 7,000 Rand each month so that I can pay for my personal expenses. Can you see how immediately you've created separation between you and the business? You know how your business is doing, and you can also control your personal spending. If it's all mixed together, and suddenly I've got a whole bunch of transport costs, I've got groceries, I've got my mobile data, all coming off one account, how much of this is business? How much of this is personal? How is my business doing? I have no idea. So it's an easy way to just pull these things apart so that you know what's coming in and out of your business, and you know what's coming in and out of your personal account. Because it also, as much as we're talking about, getting organized for our business, we have to get organized for ourselves as well. We do, as on a personal level, have to have some idea of what we're spending each month. How much am I spending on groceries? How much am I spending on clothing? How much am I spending on cell phone data and airtime? Because maybe I'm spending too much. And maybe I need to change my behavior a little bit on a certain thing. So this is allowing us to be financially literate for our business and for us personally. It allows us for our business to very clearly see what money has come in this month, what money has gone out this month. So if I ask you in Rand terms, what sales did you make in February? If you have this separation, then it's quite easy to look at your business, and it will still be in your name if you're a sole trader, your business account, and see what came in. And what's come in is either going to be sales or somebody lending my business some money or me giving my business some money. Those are the only things that are going to come in. So now it's really easy to figure out, what did I sell this month? What did I sell this month compared to last month? I don't have this mix of personal expenses and business expenses all together. It's also now really easy for me to say, what did my business spend money on this month versus what did I as a person spend money on this month? So this then sets us up for the next piece, which is financial data analysis. Now, again, this sounds like a fancy term, but it's not really, because it's us looking at what's happening and seeing what works and what doesn't. Now, when we talk about financial data analysis, this is where the maths bit starts to kick in, because this is when you can start to do some sums. And this is what tends to worry people a bit. But at its most basic, you're adding up what came in and you're adding up what went out. And you're keeping a note of that. And you're saying, in March, 25,000 Rand came in. In February, 22,000 Rand came in. So I'm analyzing my sales between February and March and saying, hey, in March, I had more sales. Good thing. I'm saying, what did I spend? What money went out in March? And how is that different to what went out in February? I'm analyzing my business expenses. What I can do is group expenses together. So what did I spend on transport? What did I spend on my product, buying from suppliers? What did I spend on equipment in my business? So now we're adding together by expense category. We're just grouping and sorting what went out. Because then I can say, hey, this month I spent 3,000 Rand on transport, and last month, cheapest, I spent 5,000 Rand on transport. What on earth happened last month? Oh, hang on, I actually had to go to Joburg because I was going to see some important clients there. That makes sense. So I've analyzed what's going on in my business, and that's what analysis is. Let me look, let me figure out what's going on, let me figure out whether I'm on track or not. Now, there are two really important sums that we need to start doing within our business as part of this financial data analysis section. And these are referred to as margins. And a lot of people say, well, what's your GP margin? What's your net margin? And sometimes that, again, can freak people out. So let's figure out what those things are. Firstly, margin just means ratio, percentage, fraction. Anybody who's done, maybe sort of even grade 6, grade 7, my daughter's in grade 6, so I help her with her maths. She's doing fractions. So we're talking about grade 5, grade 6 maths here. So we're not talking about, university level stuff. This is primary school stuff. We're doing fractions. And for some people, that's still tricky, and that's okay. But a nice way to think about it is we all have phones. Some of us have tablet devices or laptops as well. What percentage battery do I have left? Because that's critical. Hey, if we're on the go, like, oh, jeepers, I've only got 20% battery left. That's a fraction. What percentage, what amount of the total have I got? So when we're talking about fractions, we're talking about what small part of the total. If my phone's only got 12% battery left, I've only got 12 parts out of a possible 100 left, I'm in trouble. So a margin is a fraction. And when we talk about margins, we're talking about it in percentage terms. So a gross margin will not apply to everybody. If your business doesn't sell a product, then a gross margin doesn't make sense for you. So if your business doesn't sell products, hang on one sec, because net margins will be important for you. Those people that sell products, you've got to buy the raw materials from somewhere. Maybe it's raw materials, maybe it's something that somebody discarded, but there is a cost to you for going to get hold of those raw ingredients that you are going to turn into a finished product that you sell. and that is the cost of your goods. So let's say I sell t-shirts and I buy t-shirts from a Chinese supplier. I've been onto Alibaba and I buy a whole container load of t-shirts and it costs me a certain amount of money. Let's say I've spent 15,000 Rand buying t-shirts. I've got tons of t-shirts. There is a cost to me for those t-shirts. It's 15,000 Rand. I don't go and sell the t-shirts for 15,000 Rand. That would be crazy. I put a markup on what it costs me to buy the t-shirts and I go and sell them. So if it's cost me 15,000 Rand for the t-shirts, I'm hoping that I'm going to sell them maybe even double. Maybe I sell them at 30,000 Rand. So when I want to work out my gross margin, I'm saying revenue, what did I sell my products for, minus what did it cost me to have the products in the first place, here comes the fraction, divided by the revenue. So this, if you're in a product-based business, this is something you must be doing. But again, you can't do this unless you've got your paperwork organized, which means that I know what my sales are each month. I know what my costs are each month. And then if I've got those numbers, I can work out for this month what my gross margin is. Revenue, that's my sales. How much did I make? Minus what it cost me to buy the goods, divided by the revenue. And some of you will be able to know those numbers in your head and plug them into your calculator. And you're going to get some small decimal number. Okay? This is just a tiny bit of maths. We've got to turn that decimal number, let's say it's 0.45. What does that mean? Times 100 to give us a percentage, 45%. So 0.45 times 100 would give us 45%. And that would be our gross margin. And if I'm selling products, keeping track of the gross margin is important because I want to make sure that there is enough clear water between what it costs me to buy the products and what I sell them for. Because if there's not clear water between those two things, I'm in trouble. Because my business is not just going to incur the cost of buying the goods. That's not the only expense I have. That's an important expense if I'm selling products, but I've also got to pay myself. I may also need to pay rent on a small factory. I've also got to pay for my cell phone. I've also got to pay for business transport. I've also got to pay for business advertising. So I've still got a whole lot of other expenses that need to come off. But if I'm selling products, keeping track each month of my gross margin is important. And if you're going to sell a new product, let's say you've come up with a new idea and you want to figure out what you should sell it for, a good way of doing it is saying, well, what is it going to cost me to make this product? Maybe I've got to buy the raw materials and I've got to pay for somebody to help me put these things together. I want to make a decent gross margin on this thing so I can figure out what I should sell it for. So gross margin, which is gross profit. Our gross profit is that top bit of revenue minus cost of goods. So when sometimes people say GP margin, they're really saying gross profit margin. What is the relationship between my sales and what it costs me to get the goods? It's an important number. But now, if you don't have products, I've got no cost of goods. Maybe I'm just offering a service. Maybe I'm teaching. Maybe I'm advising. Maybe I'm doing any number of things that are service-based. So I've got no cost of goods. I'm not buying goods to resell. So then what do I do? Because I still need to figure out whether my business is doing well or not. Then what I'm going to do is just look at my net margin. And this doesn't mean that net margin is not appropriate for product-based businesses. Product-based businesses have to do two things. They have to work out their gross margin first and their net margin second. If you're a service-based business, you can't really work out a gross margin because you've got no cost of goods. So you just jump straight to net margin. And net margin is, let me figure out what I've sold, my revenue, minus all my expenses for the month. Everything that is a business expense. So again, this is why it's important to pull apart personal expenses and business expenses. Otherwise, it's hard for us to figure out what our business expenses are. So revenue minus all my business expenses divided by my revenue. And again, I'm going to get some little decimal number. Maybe I get 0.25 times by 100, 25%. Now, for a business to really be successful, you want a high net margin because it means there is very much clear water between the revenue that I'm making, the sales that I'm making, and what it costs me to be in business, all my expenses. So we want to try and get a high net margin. It means the business is doing well, we can continue, we can keep making an impact, we can do new things, we can employ more people because the business is doing well. So if you want to grow, you want to expand either your products or the number of people that are on your team, your business needs to have a good net margin, which means the difference between the sales I make and the expenses that I have to incur, that I can't avoid to be in business, there must be clear water between those two things. You need to work this out every month. You need to check month on month whether I am going forward. A lot of people will be pre-sales. Okay, it's a term, I think it came out of America. Everybody says, oh, but you know, great business, but I'm pre-sales. Means I've got no revenue. So now what do you do? Because none of these things now make sense. And so if you've got no revenue, or your revenue is really tiny, but you've got lots of expenses, your gross margin and your net margin might look horrendous. And that's okay. That is to be expected in a very early stage. In fact, you may not be able to work these things out because your revenue might be zero. So your goal is to get to a point where you can actually work out a net margin. If you have no revenue, then doing these little fractions, impossible. If I have no revenue yet, then I have got to be absolutely eagle-eyed on my expenses. How are my expenses changing from one month to the next? Am I spending more? Am I spending less? What am I spending on? So if you are in the very early stages of no revenue, you can't do margins yet, but you absolutely can analyze and keep track of your expenses. And I can even start working out how are my expenses changing from one month to another? Are my expenses increasing? I'm spending more money. Are my expenses decreasing? You may decide you're going on a big advertising push. You're going to blast social media with your idea, in which case your advertising expense might increase from one month to another, and that's okay. But it's allowing you to almost keep track of the decisions you're making in your business. And that's what financial data analysis is about, is keep track, review the information, check that the information makes sense relative and compared and together with the business decisions that I'm making. So that I don't say, oh my goodness, my expenses are mushrooming. What am I spending on? And I didn't have that as my plan. Is it okay to calculate my net margin on a quarterly basis because my revenue changes all the time? Absolutely. Some businesses have a very, very erratic revenue cycle month on month. Some months are huge, some months are nothing. So if your revenue cycle is all over the show, in other words, big sale, nothing, big sale, nothing. And that's sometimes, particularly when we're selling a big service or a big product, we've gone and done a big sale into one customer and now we've got nothing for a while we build our sales pipeline, then it doesn't make sense to do this month on month. It may make sense to do this quarterly. It may even make sense to add this all together and do it on a 6-month or even a 12-month basis. So your comparison period, whether you're doing this month on month, you may be even doing this week on week, depending on how your business looks. You've got to match your analysis period with your business cycle. So how long and how frequently do I sell? If I'm a supermarket, I'm selling every day. I may even do this day on day to say, hey, I can notice that Saturdays are my big days. So how does that allow me to make decisions for my business? Saturdays, big jump up in sale compared to Friday. I need to have more staff on the floor on Saturday because everybody comes to do this shopping on Saturday. So I'm analyzing my business finances and making decisions on that basis. So you need to figure out your business sales cycle. Are my sales pretty steady, week on week, month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year? And then use that as your analysis period. Okay. Right, so let's talk now about budgeting and planning. So this is very much about having a plan and sticking to it. And now, like now is a good time, if you can't be operational, now is a good time to get your paperwork in order. Now is a very good time to plan. And again, if you're a new business and you are pre-revenue, you don't have revenue yet, it's really hard to say, hey, next month I'm going to make 5,000 Rand, and then the month after that I'm going to make 8,000 Rand, and the month after that I'm going to make 10,000 Rand. It's almost impossible to accurately figure out what's coming in the future. But what you can do is say, these are the expenses that I'm going to incur, and this is my max. Because for a lot of small businesses, we don't have a lot of revenue. It means that we have to take really close control over our expenses. And this can happen on a business basis and a personal basis. And again, that's why it's important to pull apart that business and personal. So we can have a plan to say, I will not spend more than 1,000 Rand a month on clothing. I won't. And it's tempting because we walk in the shops and we're like, oh, knew this, knew that. I'll just get it and I'll borrow it out of next month's budget. Don't do it. This is again where that attitude, that self-discipline has got to shape your behavior. You've got to say, I am spending this amount of money on this type of expense, and I won't go beyond it, because that expense creep happens fast. Spend a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So you've got to, the important thing is here, you've put together a plan, write it down. It doesn't have to be a fancy spreadsheet. You can get a piece of paper, make some columns, your different months, your different expense categories. You'll know what they are on your products, on your advertising, on your rent, on maybe getting some casual help in your business. What are you going to spend on those things? What is your max spend level? Write it down. Put that piece of paper somewhere where you can't avoid it. And lockdown, probably on your fridge, because we all seem to be every 2 seconds, everyone's hungry and opening the fridge. So put that piece of paper on your fridge, I will, and it's basically, I will not overspend on these categories. And again, this is not saying spend nothing. We want to be in business. And if we want to be in business, we have to incur expenses. We can't be in business for nothing. We can't be in business and incur no expense. There will be expenses, but what we need to make sure is that our expenses don't run away with us. And we've spent so much money on silly things that we've got nothing left over for the real stuff. Right now, businesses that are going to survive are the businesses that created a cash safety net months ago. So those businesses that have said, I'm only spending very fixed amount of money, and my extra I'm going to put aside for a rainy day, those businesses will survive because they now have, and we really are in a rainy day situation, they now have that little cash safety net to draw from. A lot of businesses have got no cash safety net. They can't pay their staff, they can't pay their suppliers, bankrupt almost overnight. And it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. But this is why budgeting and planning is so important, because it's forcing you to be disciplined about what your business and what you spend your money on. And it forces you to say, I'm going to set aside a little bit for the rainy day. We can't set aside our rainy day fund all at once. We've got to slowly build up to it. But the businesses that have that cash firepower, they will survive now. And the businesses that didn't do proper budgeting and planning and were living quite literally month to month, everything that came in went out, unfortunately, in this environment, they may not survive. And a number of them may have to declare themselves bankrupt, run out of money, can't pay their staff, can't pay their suppliers, can't pay the taxman. The taxman's the big one sitting waiting for money at the moment. So write down your plan, put it somewhere where you can't avoid it, and stick to it. And that will see you through the hard times. Okay, revenue generation. I can't businesses can keep operating, and the financial service, some kind of food type business. Fantastic. This is, a time for you to really, really deliver for your customers. But for a lot of us, this is about just trying to see what can we do? Is there something that we can do to generate business? So I've got cousins of my husband that live up in Joburg, and they've got a little factory-based business, and they supply products to the mines, oils, lubricants, stuff for the mining operation. And they were like, hey, if we can make those chemicals, we can make hand sanitizer. So they'd never made hand sanitizer in their lives before, but they're like, what can we do? Because we can't sell things to the mines at the moment. The mines are shut. We don't know when they will restart. How can we hustle? How can we do something clever that will allow us to stay in business? So this is the time to say, like, it's a changed world, but what can I do to start bringing in a little bit of money doing something? And maybe it's totally different from what I had in mind, but this is the time to be creative and to be resilient and to hustle a little bit on your revenue generation. And maybe it's not what you're going to do forever, but it's what you need to do right now. Really set aside some time to say, if my business can't work right now, what can I do instead? Is there something I can do instead? Okay. And I hope that we can come back to revenue generation and speak a little bit more about this when the world is slightly less crazy. Financial service providers. So we spoke about These guys being the regulated part of our financial ecosystem in South Africa. These are our banks, these are our grant providers, these are our lenders, these are our insurers, and they are regulated, which means there are a lot of rules that they have to abide by. You also need to think about your suppliers as being a form of financial service provider to you. Right now, if you are being squeezed on your cash and you're not sure whether you can pay your suppliers, this is the time to pick up the phone to them, to email them, to get on a WhatsApp chat with them. Hey, I'm in difficulty. How can we figure this out? Communication right now is so important. If your is phone to them and say, or you've borrowed money from your family that you were supposed to be paying back every month and you can't right now, get hold of them, speak to them. Really, like, this is when you're going to either sink or swim, because your communication and your ability to work out a plan is either good or not. So there are a lot of other things that we could talk about with financial service providers and investors and grant money and how should I structure it and equity versus debt and all of those fancy things. But in this environment, get on the phone, get on the WhatsApp, set up a Zoom call, Google Hangouts, whatever it may be, send an email to just figure things out. Because what's important to remember is that you're in this situation not because of anything that you personally have done. It's not because you have made bad decisions. This is just the world right now. So that's very different from, hey, bank, I can't pay you back because I blew all my money on a new delivery vehicle that I didn't really need. So that was a bad decision on my part. That's not the world we're in. Nobody here has made bad decisions. We're just, it's called systemic risk, if you want the fancy name. Because we're in a business system, we're all exposed to this risk. There is no place to hide. What we need to do is make sure that we all survive, which means speaking to all the people that are in our chain of operations, our suppliers, our customers, our bank providers, our insurers, our grant officers, our family members, anybody that we typically interact with. Speak to them, figure out a plan together. And dealing with regulations. So again, we're in a very different environment right now. Normally, we'd have to talk about tax, and we'd have to talk about consumer protection, and we'd have to talk about safety and all of those things. But right now, and the and can't do work for us. Is there something that we can change about our business so that we can provide a service to our community? Can we even just support our community in this environment? Can we help our community figure out how to make Zoom calls? Just being helpful. Can we help with sending data around so people can make the rules in which we've got to live work for us? So what can you do that perhaps no one else can do? How can you be helpful in a way that perhaps no one else can? Is there something that your business can switch to that is capabilities? What's really important right now is that this is the time where we're going to, as businesses and as people, make customers for life or lose customers forever. So I've got a very good example personally of that. I was supposed to go to Port Elizabeth with my daughter, and we'd booked some accommodation and we were going to fly there. And the accommodation provider were instantly like, hey, you can't travel. I know you've paid your money, money back, done. I will always use that accommodation provider. The airline that I was supposed to fly with took forever to get back to me and said, sorry, your ticket's not eligible for a voucher. You think I'm going to fly with them again? Not a chance. So this is the time where you can show your customers, your suppliers, that you are in it with them, or you could risk losing them forever. So just think about what you can do in this regulatory environment to build that lasting loyalty. And that takes me to nearly the end. Coming back to our financial literacy levels. We've got knowledge, we've got behavior, we've got attitude. So this is the time, if you're not able to operate, what can I do to invest in my knowledge about my business finances? There's a lot of free stuff out there, and hopefully things like today that Ian's putting together will be of use to you, but invest in yourselves. This is a time to up your knowledge, learn a little bit more. In terms of behavior, really this is the time to get organized. And if you take nothing else away from this, use this time to get yourselves organized and to do some forward planning. And part of that is going to say, I might not be a finance expert. I might be daunted by the thought of accounting. I might be daunted by the thought of computing business ratios and margins, but I'm going to get on top of this. Find some inner confidence, get over some of those number fears. And if you've got a number fear because of a bad maths teacher, try and forget about it and work slowly through some of your numeracy concerns. So this is the time to change your attitude so that you change your behavior, so that you increase your knowledge, because it means you will come out of this in a much stronger, better placed position. And now we've had a couple of questions along the way, but now is a time for more questions if there are any. And again, there is no such thing as a dumb question. There are no dumb questions. So if you've got a question that you want to ask, we can use the chat, and maybe we can even kind of go to video at this point. So what I will do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and so that we just have video. Let me see how I can do that. And if anybody wants to ask any questions, either in the chat, or if you're feeling okay and you want to do it by voice, now's your time.
Thanks so much, Tarryn. Ian Domisa has a question. Ian, do you want to share that with us? It is on the chat.
Hi, Lynn. Hi, Tarryn. Thank you. Lynn, my question was already answered. Tarryn nailed it.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad. Cool.
What I would love for you all to do is to ask me a question. So I kind of feel that everybody's got one little question hanging around. So we tend to say, are there any questions? And everybody's scared to start. So what if I say, please all ask me a question, even if it's a silly question? So great, here's a question. Is it a great move to give an accountant your bank statement, or how does it work with bookkeeping? Okay, that is a really good question. So here's the thing about the accounting and finance profession. There's different parts to this. A bookkeeper, and we get different levels of bookkeeper as well. Tends our record is all read up. We need a bookkeeper to help us, and that's cool. And some bookkeepers will then be able to do our tax returns for us. Because if we're a business, or even if we're a personal individual and we're making profits, SARS are going to say, hooray, I want some of that. So a bookkeeper will go from records to financial data preparation. They won't do any of the analysis for us. We still need to ask for that financial data preparation and do the analysis ourselves. And a bookkeeper may be able to do our tax returns. An accountant is essentially a slightly scaled up bookkeeper. So depending on the complexity of our business, and particularly if we're buying and selling things from overseas, and maybe we've got a bit of an exchange rate issue in there, we may need somebody with a higher level of skills, particularly when it comes to our tax returns. And if we're a bigger business and we're VAT registered and we've got to do VAT returns, then we may need somebody more than a bookkeeper. So bookkeepers tend to charge for their time, assuming you don't have somebody working for you that you're paying every month. If you give a bookkeeper a box full of papers and say, turn this into financials, or you give a bookkeeper your bank statement, they'll do it for you. And a lot of bookkeepers will be happy to dig through all those papers. But you're now actually making more work for them. So if you were able to do that yourself, there'd be less for the bookkeeper to do to turn it into financials that you could analyze. But this is about where your skill set is, what you're prepared to pay for, and what you're not. A lot of bookkeepers will just work off your bank statement and say, we're going to treat the bank statement as the record of what's going on in your business. But then what they're doing is essentially just categorizing those bits and pieces. They're running through your bank statement and say, okay, here are all your goods costs, here are all your advertising costs, here are all your staff costs, and they're just grouping and sorting. In this day and age, we actually get quite a lot of software that can do that job of grouping and sorting for us. So we may not need to pay for a bookkeeper if that's what they're doing. Also, if you go all the way to tax preparation and submitting tax returns, and let's say SARS says, I want to come and audit you. SARS are not going to be satisfied with just a bank statement. We still need those invoices. We still need those receipts. So we can't escape that process just by giving and just by keeping track of our bank records. Okay, so I hope that sort of answered your question. So absolutely, if you just want your records prepared, bank statement, great. But that doesn't escape the fact that you need all those other records from a really much a tax and regulatory point of view. So Ellie, that's also a great question, asking about Excel or an online app. Again, this comes down to what are you most familiar with? A lot of people are not familiar with Excel. Excel freaks them out. There are so many online apps these days that can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So for example, I use Wave apps. It's called Wave apps. It's free. I pay nothing. I send all my invoices from Wave. I've got all my products there, teaching things that I provide, all my customers, and I send an invoice from Wave. And then when they pay me, I can go on Wave and say, yes, this one's paid. Oh, this one's still outstanding. I need to chase up on that. So again, use this time to go and see what small business accounting software or admin software is out there. So for example, like First National Bank, FNB, if you are a business customer of theirs, which means you have a formal business and you've opened a business bank account, they have business accounting software that's freely available. But have a look at Sage, at QuickBooks, at Wave. All of these things are good accounting things. You may even be able to make a personal budgeting app work for your business too. So have a look. You don't have to do it in Excel. Excel is easy for doing the analysis part, because Excel allows you to do those sums and keep track of the answer to those sums without getting out your calculator and writing down numbers. Okay, so next question. I have a challenge with setting up a system on Excel that will help me extract financial information that F&B requires monthly. Do you have a suggestion? So I think I'm going to need a little bit more. Yes, thank you. Talking about SARS and invoices. Does SARS accept receipts? If I buy some of my supplies from SARS, the receipt doesn't have my VAT number. Yeah, receipt is fine. I tell you what's important with receipts in particular, and this really supplies absolutely, but a lot of times people will take a prospective business client or customer out for lunch or out for a coffee or buy them a sandwich or pay for something. What's important with receipts is that you take that receipt and you turn it over and you write just with a pen on the back. Let's say I've taken a customer to Mug and Bean, not now, but 2 months' time, I take a customer to Mug and Bean for a coffee and a muffin. I need to turn that receipt over and say, I took Joe, who's a potential business customer. This was a business expense. Because how do I prove that this wasn't my coffee and muffin or my coffee and muffin for my family? All right. So some way of actually just noting on that receipt that this was a legitimate business expense. And the reason why SARS is so concerned about is this a legitimate business expense or not is because when I work out income tax, so what I owe SARS, I say my sales minus all my expenses is my profit, hopefully, and I pay tax on my profit. If I've got lots of expenses, I've got very little profit left over, which means I pay very little tax. But if my expenses aren't business expenses, it means I'm pushing down my profit number, which means I'm pushing down my tax that's payable to SARS, and SARS get upset. So SARS are like, hey, if you're going to deduct expenses, they must be business expenses, and you must be able to prove that they're business expenses. Okay, so receipts are fine. Again, it's part of your record. It's part of your business record. You have to store them because SARS may come back and say, prove to me that those things from SPA were legitimate business expenses. And I got there a digital copy of my receipt and say, here they were. This is the coffee and the tea and the sugar and whatever else I needed, legitimate business expense. Okay. What this comes down to, if you've got lots of bits of paper, and this is where a bookkeeper tends to be useful, but there's nothing to say that we can't do this ourselves, particularly when we've got cash-based transactions, and we've got a receipt. Somebody needs to manually capture the information into some kind of electronic, either Excel spreadsheet or accounting software. So if you have got the capacity and the attention to detail to do that, fantastic, because it's a cost saving for your business because you are taking care of that. But there's going to come a point in time where you need somebody in your business that keeps track of those business expenses, in which case somebody like a bookkeeper is going to need to get your receipts and physically type in the numbers for that expense into some sort of spreadsheet or software. Okay. This is a tricky one, changing on this. So I don't want to give you a yes, you do, no, you don't. It's kind of a gray issue right now. So can I ask that I keep a note of that question and just give you the absolute right answer, and I can ask Ian or Lindsay or Ellie to share that right answer with you. Okay. Car travel logbook. We used to, in days gone by, we used to have to log everything. But there are certain circumstances now where we don't need to show the actual logbook. We can estimate, but let me absolutely confirm those details, and I will make sure you get hold of that answer. Anybody else got a question that they want to post about anything business, tax, setup related?
Tarryn, there's just that one from it's Nondamisa, so Bumba.mobi. She just elaborated a little bit more there.
Okay, cool.
About, I guess, putting together a basic balance sheet and income statement in Excel.
Okay. So what I would love to be able to have an opportunity with you guys is to guide you through how we might do that, because it is a process. But I would say to you, the most important one to start with is actually your income statement, to do that monthly. Balance sheets, definitely important, and particularly for those businesses that own a lot of things, which we call assets, or businesses that owe a lot of money. So we've borrowed money, those are our liabilities, and those things come on our balance sheet. But step one is income statement. And we can make it really simple. We don't have to have it look like official accounting documents. And that's also the difference between doing something for us as business managers and owners versus doing something that is accounting compliant. So we don't have to worry about accounting compliance to start with. Start at the top, sales. And if you're in a business that sells products, cost of sales, gross profit, which is the difference between those two things, and then really expenses. All your expenses grouped by sensible category, so we don't need every line item, but what did I spend on bank fees? What did I spend on consumables for my office, paper and pens and printer ink? What did I spend on rent? What did I spend on advertising? And then what's the answer? Sales minus what it cost me if I've got products, minus all my expenses, is my profit. Each column, new month. And it doesn't have to be anything more fancy than that. That is an income statement. Income statement is really what sales did I make minus what expenses did my business incur, what did I spend the money on, what's left over. And just keep track of that every month. And if you have to sort of alter that, then do it. It says, when you receive grant funding, how do you submit it to SARS as it might seem like revenue? Oh, goodness. We're big on our tax questions today. I don't want to give you a direct answer to that, but there's a very big difference between funding and revenue, and those two things are not the same. So you're absolutely right that grant revenue is not, grant funding is not revenue. Can I come back to you on that one as well? Because I want to just put a sort of a clear answer together. So I'm going to take another note. Grant funding versus revenue. Okay, it's not dissimilar to if I've received a loan from my family. So my family have given me 5,000 Rand to start my business. That's not revenue, that's a loan. In the same way as grant funding is not revenue, it's funding. And so those are different things. But let me give you a sort of a good, correct answer on that. Sharing slides, absolutely. I will email them to Ian and to Lindsay, and I know they will be able to distribute those to you.
Tarryn, yeah, so just to jump in, Tarryn, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I think what I'm sure the guys, there's been a lot to absorb, and I think they'll probably reflect on it and come up with some issues. And I think just for everybody on the call, what we're looking to do with Tarryn is keep her available, have her available on an ongoing basis to either run some maybe clinics, so not always a big presentation like this, but maybe to get her online in smaller groups where you can actually have a conversation. And then if some of you have got specific challenges that need one-to-one advice, then we'll absolutely arrange that, and you can spend some one-to-one time with Tarryn. So don't think this is your last chance to pick her brains on things. What we are going to do, Linz will probably send out, or we'll send out a form just asking for your feedback on this. What were the areas that were interesting? Are there still areas that you would like more depth on? And that'll help us and Tarryn work out, how best to answer that. Is there a common topic that you're all coming up with where it's worth another group webinar? Is it more of a sort of online clinic where she can answer questions directly, or is it that one-to-one stuff? So, it's just amazing to have access to Tarryn's experience and knowledge and just understanding of what you guys are going through. I think that's the main thing. So we will send that form out to get your feedback, and you'll all have opportunity to access Tarryn's expertise. Okay. And I think, we've taken up a little bit more time than planned, but Tarryn, thank you so much. It really was amazing. As I say, just the level of insight and understanding as to what people are going through, and everybody's, obviously everybody's so concerned about their financial situations right now, but just being able to take that fear and try and break it down into manageable chunks that you can actually understand what's happening and understand what your situation is. And as you say, use that time to plan and use that time to put the systems in place, the data capturing, not data capturing, the getting together of slips. Let's not use the fancy term. So getting together of slips. So and I think all of us can get so much out of that. So perfect. Guys, Tarryn, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for attending. And we'll be letting you know when the next webinar is and what the topic is very soon.
Perfect. Ian, Lindsay, Ellie, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. So glad to have been able to do this with you guys.
Okay. Thanks, Tarryn. Thanks, everybody.